Good afternoon, and thank you very much for your invitation. We very much value this event because you are a key part of the audience that we hope to influence and work with. So, in Mike's absence, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our vision in the college, the future, and also some of the work that we are doing. This is going to be a very important year for the college. We have been here for a while, you know, and we have had a number of successes, but we believe that we now need to take stock and to review what we do. We need to review how we do it and with whom we collaborate when we do what we do, which is basically a whole range of policy issues, implementation, challenges, education, support, and giving you ideas, setting standards. And in doing this, the key thing this year, the big thing, is we know, we've always known really, but we really do know that we have to listen carefully and intently. I say that again, carefully and intently. The timing of this is crucial. We all know that this is a particularly challenging year for policing, and probably, frankly, one of many. So we have a responsibility at the college to be sensitive to the extremely demanding environment in which you operate and all those people you lead operate. It is customary to say complimentary things about your hosts, but as it happens, it's not particularly difficult in this case. Because I do believe, and I have believed for a while, and I've been involved in policing actually for 10 years, that the superintendent's group is absolutely pivotal. Why is it pivotal? It's pivotal because you are key in interpreting and in translating the policies and the strategies that are developed within the force and outside the force. You are key in protecting and promoting what's best for the service. You have long-term institutional memory embedded in here, but at the same time, you are also expected to, and you do, set the tone for professionalism, for inspiring people that you lead, for now and of course for the future. You're also very important in giving that layer of assurance to the public, to the citizen, when there is assurance to be given on behalf of the police. So, as individuals and as a collective, as here, you represent that critical point of the current and of the future leadership. And the next generation, and you are also, I'm sure, many of you here are the next generation of very important senior policemen. So in recognizing these very challenging times, we can see how complexity has built upon complexity. The complexity of crime, new demands, reducing resources, requires you to work very much under pressure. You're reduced in numbers. You carry an increasing burden of operational risk. This is not new, and this is not just from me. Your president has been saying this from 6 o'clock this morning. I woke to the sound of Gavin on the radio, and I thought to myself, just as well that I've also incorporated that in my speech, because I do genuinely believe that we have to respond to your challenges. So we must develop our role in supporting you. Because, you know, that's what professional bodies do. That is actually the job of professional bodies. We need to be much clearer about the standards we set and how we set them and what we set them for. We have to identify knowledge of what works, what's on the cutting edge, what needs more work done, and share it with you, and share it with you in a way that you can use, simple ways. We have to recognize excellence, and we have to promote professionalism, encourage forces to develop the structures that will embed behaviors in the future, and also develop the individuals in a way that helps you and them in a practical way, physically for them, and giving them psychological support. So I want to say a little bit more about the college, because I've been saying we. So who are this we? Well, we have a governance structure in the college. There's a college board, which I share. And as you probably know, Gavin, your president, is a member of our board. He's not always a compliant member, which is good, because we know that life is full of dissidence and debate, which works very well. But I have to say, and I can say this very honestly, because I've worked with Gavin for a few years, that he can always be relied on to represent you, to talk, give your views in a very balanced way, in a considered way, and a thoughtful way. And I thank you, Gavin, for being such a valuable critical friend. I like to think about Gavin as a foundation stone of the college. I don't know if that metaphor quite works, Gavin, but it's meant in a nice way. But to help us make further progress, we have, of course, we've got a board that has other experts on the board. So we have a chief constable, JMP chief constable. We have Gavin from Supers. We have a PCC on the board, and we have a member, somebody from the Fed. But we have added some new members to the board who have themselves run professional bodies and regulatory bodies in health, in academia, and in other fields. They will bring experience to the board, which will help us manage this whole business of how does a professional body connect with the profession in a much better way, and I'm looking forward to that. However, there is one area, and I've already mentioned it, where we need to do much, much, much better, and that is the way we communicate with all other entities in the policing family. And that includes the Home Office, it includes the PCCs, it includes the NPCC, it includes the representative organizations like yourself, the individual forces, and of course, individual officers. It's no mean task. It is quite a tall order. But I'm afraid that nothing we can do can be effective without a level of deep and meaningful conversation, discussion, and consultation with all of those entities. We will not always agree, but debate we must. And that is very much what we are setting out to do and prioritize for this year. We've done a lot of good work, but now is the time to actually crystallize that. And one of the reasons maybe that we've been thinking, Mike and I have been thinking about, is that we haven't been all that clear because we ourselves are not very clear about what our priorities are. So we've set forth a piece of work that will bring clarity to our own work, and in doing so, we are consulting with you. We've already given some input to that work, and I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. Let me just go back then to the environment. As I said, we all recognize that the substantial pressure on you, demand has changed, and college did a piece of work a couple of years ago, I think was, which identified the changing nature of demand. As you all know, there are many drivers for that change. The changing nature of crime, changing demographics, the international nature of communication, supporting digital networks of crime, of terrorism, security demands. And much of this is driven by the realities of the digital age. I come from a telecommunication environment. I spent 25 years in BT and then 5 years launching satellites. And we have always known, those of who came from that environment, the transformation power of technology. And do you know, in the last 7 years, I think you will agree, it's changed our lives out of all recognition. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the ubiquity of digital communication, bringing with it as it does easy access to connections, to information, and to knowledge, has forever, and I mean forever, changed the relationship between the citizen and the state. The citizen can now be more challenging in the way you went in your work, but also citizen is much more vulnerable than they used to be in the last 10 years ago. And that requires a very complex set of responses from you and from the teams that you lead. And the question for us in the college is how we play our part in helping you with that reality. And what we're thinking about and talking with you about is how do we best support the people working in policing? How do we best equip them with the skills and knowledge they need now and in the future? How do we identify that knowledge? How do we identify the practice that works? How do we create the standards that will help those working in policing? And how do we make sure that people are able to achieve the expertise that they need? It sounds as if we haven't done anything like that, but we have, of course, and you know we have. I know we have. But the point I'm making here is we need to do more, and we need to do more quickly, and we need to do more, and we need to do it better. And as I said, we have been consulting on these answers because we don't know all the answers. You do know many of the answers. You certainly know many of the questions. So we've had some in-depth conversations already with Gavin and Paul. But also we're doing a survey, and I understand over 100 of you have responded, and we will listen. And as I said, we will listen carefully and intently. So later this year, there will be an outcome of this work where we will have something which we're calling a plan and a page, where we'll give you the insight into what we think are the priorities. And of course, we will look forward to sharing that with you and hearing your comments. So I want to finish now with, not yet, but finish with the next set of my talk by reminding us of some of the work that we are already doing, because these are areas that you wanted us to be involved in and in which we are involved. First of all, on well-being, I'm delighted that, no thanks in small part to the efforts of this organization, the recognition and the importance of well-being has edged up the priority list for everyone and inside and out of the Home Office. It is our intention that the college is going to be a crucial part of delivering the well-being agenda. We work together with you to secure money, which is helpful, and 6 trials are in progress, which you probably know about. But it's not going to be a mean thing, is it, to implement this? Because I was thinking today that how many of you in your forces have workplace management, workforce management systems, which even trigger to you as line manager that somebody needs an intervention from a well-being perspective? That's quite important to think about. Is somebody getting to a point when they need an intervention? And you know, there will be a lot of data that will have to be created before we can properly respond to that. But it is an important part, particularly now in these very straitened times, to make sure that is a crucial part of your armory in dealing with the teams that you lead. So our intention, collective intention, is to start rolling out this package in April of next year. The other piece of work that we have been very engaged in is leadership development. We're acutely aware, as are you, that policing needs and deserves the very best leadership at every level, now more than ever. So we've revised the senior leadership program for newly promoted supers, and I hope some of you will have had the opportunity to take advantage of them or at least look at that. I know that it's not being used in every force, but we are listening to the feedback, and we will be flexible in the way we manage that and the content of that. We've also launched a virtual learning environment with CMI, with the Chartered Institute of Management for Level 7 qualifications, and again, I hope that that will be helpful. We're developing a range of leadership development activities, some of which we delivered very specifically targeted to supers, and again, we hope to hear feedback once we are able to do that. As many of you will know, that we've been working very closely with Paul Griffiths, who's been instrumental in developing coaching and mentorship workshops for you, which will help us spot and support talent from underrepresented groups, and I think that's a very important part of our platform. And lastly, looking further ahead, we have reviewed the senior PNAC courses and the SCC in response to the concerns that were raised on a number of issues, include diversity, and we found that also from chief officer surveys, and we've taken a number of measures. It appears that they've been very positive because there's been a significant increases in diversity of applicants in the PNAC course, for the PNAC course October this last year. And then the SEC intake for 2018 is also very diverse. I have to say, although, I need to pause for a minute and just mention diversity. When people talk about diversity, we become a little bit loose in the talk. We tend to refer to ethnic minority diversity as the only diversity issue, and that isn't. It is an issue because we do want to be more diverse, but we actually want to encourage people from all walks of the public to be involved in policing. So I see diversity as a wider topic than just gender or ethnicity, although of course gender and ethnicity are important. I want to talk a little bit about entry routes. It's fitting, I think, that the Service for the Future means creating entry routes at police constable rank that support and equip new officers to succeed. You'll be aware that entry routes for police constable ranks will change from January 2020. We've had a number of discussions on what is the right year, and we've alighted on 2020, so which gives people time to get used to it. And I know that if Mike were here, he would say that there's much more work for the college to do in communicating these changes, because we haven't quite landed it, as you know. So we need to be more clear that the new entry routes will not affect serving officers. As a serving officer, one is not required to have a degree, and not having a degree won't affect your seeking promotion. There's no change in the entry requirements. New recruits will not need a degree to join as a police constable under the new routes. However, new recruits without a degree will complete a modern higher apprentice course and be awarded a degree in professional policing practice after successfully passing their probation. You know, I was quite involved when we looked at this, and it was interesting. It wasn't us that sort of came up with the degree thing. When we presented to the powers that be in education and those that were designing these apprentice courses, what a police officer is trained in and what a police officer is expected to do, they said, you know, this is a degree. So actually it came about in that way, but that's not to say we don't think it's important. And I know we've had a number of forces have actually recruited apprentices this year who will be on that route. As it happens, it also helps with the levy that the government has got, but that's not why we designed this course. We've also got a revised curriculum replacing the existing initial police learning and development program, which is more than 12 years old, as you know, and no longer quite addresses the needs. So with that is being worked on. What is changing, though, is that you as serving officer, or indeed later as retired officers and staff, can have your career experience and your job training acknowledged and given the recognition that that qualification requires. And we hope that this, you will understand that this will be a good thing, and it's long overdue. So moving on to another area that we're looking at very much with yourselves, and you raised it in 2025, that's public protection and safeguarding. Gavin was very instrumental in drawing attention to the issues faced by those police individuals leading public protection units, and that vast majority of PPU leads did not feel they were trained or qualified to do the job that they're being required to do. We are addressing this, it's our shared concern, and we are developing a new learning program to meet those requirements. We need to get this sensitive, and we need to get this right. Finally, the other piece of work that I ought to mention is we are working on the funding case. We are very happy to be working alongside forces, MPCC and the Home Office in helping to identify and provide the evidence base that's required to support the police case for funding for the next spending review. So there's quite a lot on our agenda in addition to the strategic things that I mentioned earlier on. So we have given ourselves quite a challenging year. And we will know that we only succeed in doing things if we can land that by communicating, by listening, and understanding the perspectives that you bring. So to this end, I would like to finish with a request and a pledge. The request is that you will invite Mike and I next year to come and talk to you. And the pledge that when you do, if you do, then you can ask us, so how did you do then? And we will require to answer to the topics that I have raised today. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you for inviting me to be here.
Millie, thank you very much. We've got about 10 minutes for questions, maybe a little less. There's some really good ones coming in on the app, but please don't be shy. Do stand up, give me a wave. I'll start with one from the app, though. You were talking about how diversity isn't just about gender or ethnicity. Very good question here. How is policing going to be more representative of the public by making all cops have or work towards a degree? The police are the public and the public are the police, as long as you have a degree, which I thought was a good question.
Well, I think as I tried to explain, I think we've got this slightly wrong in terms of the way we communicated it. We are not expecting everybody to have a degree. Those that haven't got a degree will still continue to do a job. They'll be supported. We will be supporting them. There'll be education opportunities for them.
But any new entrant will have to have a degree?
Not every new entrant, but entrants who come in through the apprenticeship route will be given the opportunity to complete a course, which they will do anyway. And at the end of the course, they will be assessed for a level 7 degree. And we hope that that will give them the opportunity to then have the recognition that they deserve. So it's going to work that way around.
Given there were a lot of likes for that question on the app, does anyone want to come back on that in the room? Just here. So, Bobby, wait for the mic, because I know you can speak very loud, but you need this mic.
So thank you. I was just going to say, I'm Bobby Ryan. I'm the BAME representative for the Supers Association. I've got some real concerns about the new apprenticeship scheme and about the fact that it limits the number of people who can actually join the police who don't have, at a minimum, 2 A-levels or equivalent. Now, if you look at the communities we disproportionately deal with, they tend to be working class communities where the opportunities to be able to gain those 2 A-levels with less privilege is much more difficult. It doesn't mean those people are unable or not likely to be very good at being police officers. In fact, they probably understand the communities that we're going to be dealing with, or we are dealing with, better than those who may come from some of the other walks of society. By limiting the number of people that can come into the organisation without those 2 A-levels, I think we are storing up problems for the future. What would you say to that?
So I think that intention is obviously not to limit, but I do understand your point. However, if you're looking at some of the work that's going on in GMP and in East Midlands, they are finding, I spent a day at GMP a couple of weeks ago, that they are finding is that they are able to attract people from the BAME community who are able to then work with the police in order to get familiar with what they want by approaching the community much earlier in the process of their education. So rather than accepting that the BAME community don't have A-levels, which I think is a short term, and you're not saying that, but actually saying that where there is potential and opportunity, we have to encourage them to come in, and that's what we will have to do in the future. It doesn't stop people without 2 A-levels applying, does it? But isn't it good to be aspirational? This is an aspirational thing, no?
Can you explain? But can you explain? Because I'd be interested in this. What are the benefits of having a degree in policing?
First of all, I think there is a recognition. You know, the work that police do is so complex, and it's no different from the nurses. It's no different from other professionals whose work is recognised by a public recognition scheme, which is a degree. Secondly, it gives us the ability to have a very structured training program so that everybody has the benefit of that training program. Thirdly, it's a transferable recognition. It's a transferable skill. So why wouldn't we want our police to have this transferable skill? Why would we not want it? I think looking forward, the sort of things that we're going to ask the police to do will be equivalent to any degree that people do. And it is a difficult thing because we are asking for a big change, and it's very controversial, but it is something that I think we need to strive to do.
Okay, another tricky question. I'm afraid people are putting you on the spot. Not afraid, it's a good thing. The college currently does not enjoy a good reputation with rank and file colleagues. Do you recognise this issue? And if so, what are you going to do to address it?
I do certainly recognise that. I don't know, it's not so much we don't have a good reputation. In some cases we do, in some cases we don't. People don't have knowledge of us, actually. I'm not ducking the issue of reputation because one only needs to read the Twitter feed and know what people don't like about us and some people who like about us. But actually, the point more importantly for me is that we haven't been able to present the work we do as being relevant to the rank and file. And that is one of the big things that is holding us back. And we really do need to understand that and make sure that what we do is understood. And as I said before, I don't think we're going to agree on everything. But if we are the professional body for the rank and file, then we have to be able to understand what it is that we're doing that helps them in doing the job.
Another question from the floor here. Great.
Neil Evans, Greater Manchester Police. It's a follow-up on that one, really. And there's a perception, not necessarily one I share, but there's a perception from talking to colleagues that the college is an extension of the MPCC or the Home Office. Yes. And then when you're trying to be relevant to the rank and file, I think that's a real inhibitor. Yeah. I just wonder if you could comment on that.
It is very confusing, isn't it? And what has happened, just go back a little bit in the history of the college, as many of you know, we kind of was formed from bits of other organisations. Initially, you'll remember some of those organisations, and we took on their role. And then we moved into a more policy role. And at that time, NPCC was very small and hadn't developed all their structures, which they have and which works very well. And it is a bit confusing. I completely accept that, because we ourselves have to think every so often is who is going to follow on with this work. And one of the important pieces of work in looking at our work that we're doing on purpose is actually to figure out who does what. Because quite often, you see, we will develop policy, but we're not actually going to be doing the implementation. So what is the responsibility on the college then to make sure that those who are going to do the implementation are then able to take it forward? And you can now see that we have to go back and have those arrangements much more securely in place. It is confusing. That's an absolutely relevant thing to say. It's confusing to us, it's confusing to the NPCC, but we have to clarify it, otherwise we can't carry on with the work. Because you didn't even mention the representative body, sorry, Kathy, because, you know, there's also the role of people like you, you know, as a representative body. So we have to marry all these into being a professional body. And there's lots of examples outside of policing where professional bodies do operate in a very effective way. And that would be my ambition, is to take us there.
Question from Dan.
Hello, Dan Murphy, National Secretary. Part of our pay is made up from our salary, but also our overall remuneration package is from our pension. The pension's managed by a group called the Strategic Advisory Body, and they make recommendations on how the pension should be managed. The pension has to break even. There's been an announcement by the government last week to say that it's not. There's certain assumptions made about our pension, about how it will progress and what levels and who will pay into it. The reason I'm raising it is because the workforce reform agenda, part of it led by the college, changes those assumptions and what happens. PEQF, the data is that it's likely to bring in younger people who might not join the pension scheme. The entry and the exit piece that the college is leading on. The question I have for you on it is, would the college include in part of their process an equality impact assessment with regard to how it will impact on our pensions?
Now, I'm going to have to address this generically as opposed to specifically. Mike, where are you when you need it? But what I will say to you is, in principle, we do impact assessments on everything, as you know, in our consultation pieces. Whether that includes an assessment on the pension or not, I couldn't honestly say. And if you're telling me it doesn't and it should do, if I may take it away and make sure I get some information back, because I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Right, there's been far too little activity from this side of the room, so I'm going to come over here and nudge you into asking some more questions. And while I'm walking, hopefully I can walk and talk at the same time, I want to ask you, Millie, whether the College of Policing will publish an evaluation of the effectiveness of the direct entry scheme for superintendents. When are you going to do that?
Well, I don't know when, but we will. Of course we will.
Rough timescale? I mean,
does anybody know? Is anybody here from the college? Do you know, Paul?
November. Great. Okay.
Thank you.
That was easy. We could have dealt with that in the bar afterwards. Anyone from this side of the room? Because I have a horrible feeling that you're all looking at your phones and having a little snooze. No? Okay. I've got plenty more on the app. Just here, please. Mike's just wending its way towards you. Thank you.
Hi there, Ian Wiley, Avon and Somerset, and an NEC member. Just going back to the degree entry, there are a number of us, I think, are concerned around the gentrification of policing, which may result from what you're describing. You touched on the illustration of nurses earlier, and what we do know from some of the problems in hospitals is that nurses no longer want to perform some of the dirtier functions of their role, and instead are more performing a higher role within the hospitals. When we look at the threats from Brexit and the mapping around potentially public disorder, are we going to have a police service in future that's really prepared to deal with the dirty end of policing, where we're facing serious violence, if we've got a group of people who are just graduates?
Well, you've conflated a number of things. Let me deal with them independently. First of all, I spend a lot of time in the health sector, and I have spent a lot of time in the health sector the last 10 years. I actually think it's a myth that the nurses don't want to perform the dirty end. What actually happened was the nurses' job was changed, and it was made a specialist jobs because they took over a lot of the stuff that doctors did. And that was the deal that was made, that the doctors didn't do certain things any longer because they became more specialized and nurses took that over. Equally, there were healthcare assistants, which not everybody implemented, who did some of the work that the nurses did. So it wasn't a simple thing that because they had degrees, they refused to put a needle in your arm. You know, actually there was a complete change in workforce management. And I'll give you a very quick example, which might sort of explain this or illustrate this. When I was a young person, very young person, my blood would be taken by a doctor. Then when I got a little older, my blood would be taken by a nurse. Now only a phlebotomist takes blood. That's not because the nurses can't be bothered to put a needle in your arm. That's because it only takes 2 weeks to train a phlebotomist, and they're very expert in what to do, and the nurse can do something else. So I absolutely wouldn't agree with the proposition that nurses don't do some of the stuff that they used to do because they've got degrees. I don't think that's right. But your further question was, will we have policemen doing the operation job? We must. We must. And we must help you to make sure that we do. So I can't see that we can be possibly disagreeing with that. And having a degree doesn't mean that you don't do operational job. When I was, I started with a degree in BT, and I climbed poles, I have to tell you. I went down, I can wire up a telephone. It's not the dirty end of the job, but it was the technical end of the job. And if I hadn't done that work, I would never have become a manager and a director. So I don't think it follows. I really don't. But we could talk in the bar.
Just one more on the degree thing. Is the College of Policing at odds with the opinion of the Home Secretary, who said that he believes a degree is unnecessary at the recent Police Federation conference?
You're going to have to ask the Home Secretary that tomorrow. Was
he off message, though? Was he off message?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Yeah, but he said that, so was he off message?
I'm not quite sure exactly what he said in response to what the question was, but you can quiz him on that. I will tell you what we are doing. We have an agreement of a policy, and we are pursuing that. But of course, we will always listen to the Home Secretary. And if he would like something to be changed and altered, that would be something for debate.
Another one here. Can you explain why the college uses resources from forces to help provide training, but then charges forces extortionate amounts for that training?
That's a very balanced question, isn't it? Extremely balanced. I'm so impressed.
I'm getting a lot of hostility from the app.
The reason why we use people in the field is because they bring experience to us. Otherwise, we would have a whole infrastructure. And in the end, that wouldn't come free. Somebody somewhere will have to pay for it. It'll come out of some budget, and it'll come out of the budget that you don't get. So there are two reasons for using people from the field. One is you bring expertise and knowledge, and two is where would we get them otherwise? Secondly, is it extortionate? I don't know. I think that would be a matter of opinion.